The praise hadn't even finished echoing around the table when the trap snapped shut. The CEO's voice was still warm, still polished, still carrying that tone she used when she wanted the room to remember who held the leash. She was talking about compliance, about discipline, about how rare it was to find someone who understood federal standards without needing their hand held. Heads nodded. A few people smiled in my direction. The kind of smile that comes right before a promotion announcement. Then the temperature changed. Her chair slid back just enough to make the sound everyone hears when something official is about to happen. A thin folder appeared on the table. Not tossed, placed, careful, deliberate. "This won't take long," she said. Already standing. "We're conducting an unscheduled internal security verification." The words landed heavier than they should have. Legal glanced down. The board stopped shifting. Someone near the window closed their laptop without being asked. She continued. Calm as ever. Regulators. Irregular access out of an abundance of caution. Her hand lifted and turned toward me. Palm open. "Please hand over your laptop." A few seconds passed. Not dramatic. Just long enough for everyone to look at me and wait for a reaction. My name is Marin Caldwell. I am 48 years old. The thought came to me the same way a safety check does when something starts going wrong. Automatic. Grounding. I noticed my heartbeat before I noticed my hands moving. I slid the laptop across the table. No argument. No hesitation. That seemed to surprise her more than anything else. She pulled it toward herself. Already talking about protocol, about transparency, about cooperation. The confidence was still there when she flipped it over. It drained out of her face as soon as she read the sticker. Property of the U.S. government classified. The room didn't react all at once. It fractured. Someone inhaled sharply. Another person pushed their chair back too fast. The CEO stared at the words like they might rearrange themselves if she waited long enough. The door opened before she could recover. Two men stepped inside. No rush. No raised voices. Jackets plain. Badges visible just long enough to register. They didn't look at me first. "Which one of you authorized the seizure?" No one answered. I stayed seated. Hands folded. The laptop sat between us like a line that couldn't be crossed back over. This story is a work of fiction created by the writing team at Revenge AITA. The CEO finally spoke, but the control was gone. Her voice landed flat, stripped of the authority it had carried minutes earlier. The men listened. Took notes. One of them glanced at the sticker again, then back at her, and as the weight of what she had just invited into her own boardroom began to settle, one thought cut through everything else in my head. Sharp and unavoidable, why would a CEO invite federal scrutiny into her own boardroom? No one told me to stand. No one told me to leave. But for the first time since the meeting began, the balance in the room had shifted. And everyone knew it. The email went out before I reached the elevator. I didn't see it directly. I felt it. Phones lighting up. Chairs shifting. The quiet hum that follows a message no one wants to be associated with. Legal stood first. Not toward me away. A quick nod to security. Already positioned near the door like this had been rehearsed. No one touched my arm, but the space around me tightened. The way it does when people don't want to be seen standing too close. Standard procedure, someone muttered, not looking at me. I stepped into the hallway with my bag still on my shoulder and nothing in my hands. No laptop, no paperwork, no explanation. By the time we reached the lobby, the board had it. The wording was careful. Potential compliance breach identified. Proactive containment measures enacted. My name wasn't highlighted, but it didn't need to be. In a room full of executives, silence works faster than accusation. I caught a glimpse of the CEO through the glass wall of the conference room. She was already on another call, posture relaxed. One hand resting on the table like she'd just finished something unpleasant but necessary. Security slowed near the exit, not to stop me, to make sure everyone saw me leaving. A familiar face from finance glanced up, then back down at his phone. Another turned her body slightly. Like proximity itself carried risk, I didn't blame them. The story had already chosen its shape. Outside, one of the agents stepped closer. Voice low, professional. "You're not being detained. Not cleared either." The words hung there, balanced just enough to keep me steady and off balance at the same time. That's when it clicked. This wasn't about protecting systems or following protocol. This was about timing, about getting their version out first, locking it into records, making anything that came after sound defensive. If the accusation arrived before the facts, who would bother waiting for the rest? My phone vibrated again. Another internal message, then another. The narrative was already moving without me. The agent nodded toward the building. "We'll be in touch." I believed him. And I believed the CEO understood something else just as clearly. Whoever controls the opening line controls everything that follows. I walked away with my back straight and my hands empty, knowing the real pressure hadn't even started yet. They didn't start with questions. They started with folders. One of them slid a thin stack across the table. Not toward me, but just close enough that I could see the header, internal summary, timeline already drafted. My name appeared twice, both times attached to words like access and exposure. "This is where we are," the man across from me said, tapping the page with his knuckle. "We're trying to determine scope." The woman beside him watched my hands instead of my face. People do that when they're deciding whether you're a problem or a process. You're treating me like the variable. I said, keeping my voice even. No denial. No reassurance. "We're treating you like a point of failure." That landed harder than an accusation. Failures don't get defended. They get isolated. Another page appeared. Access logs, timestamps, cleanly formatted. Too clean. The kind of document that looks finished before the work is done. "This narrative came in early," the woman added, flipping to the next sheet. "From your company. Early." That word mattered. It meant the story had been framed before anyone asked who benefited. "They were very cooperative," the man said. "Helpful." I leaned back, letting the chair creak just enough to fill the silence. Helpful doesn't mean accurate. He didn't disagree. He didn't agree either. We're not here to litigate internal politics. There it was. Not truth. Closure. If justice was just a spreadsheet, who decided which row got deleted? The woman finally met my eyes. Cases like this don't stay open long. Someone always wants them closed. My throat tightened. But my mind stayed clear. Someone. Not something. Not evidence. A person. I looked down at the logs again. At the neat alignment of blame. At how easily a human being fit into a column. You already know who they're pointing at. I said. Neither of them corrected me. The man gathered the folders, stacked them consideration flat. "We'll need you available." "For what?" I asked, already knowing the answer. "In case we need to clarify responsibility." They stood. The chair legs scraped back in unison. "Practiced?" The door opened before I reached it. As I stepped into the hallway, the weight settled fully this time. Not fear, calculation. I wasn't being asked to help them understand what happened. I was being positioned in case they needed the case to end. They brought me back in when finance and technology were both present, like a show of balance. 2 chairs angled toward me, 1 folder each. No laptops on the table this time. The man from finance didn't bother easing in. He slid a page across. "These access logs line up with your credentials." The technology lead leaned forward. Fingers laced. Same pattern across 3 systems. Temporary workarounds were approved to meet deadlines. Approved. The words sat there, waiting to be claimed. Across the table, the CEO's voice came through the speaker, clipped and careful. Marin suggested the workaround. I asked for confirmation to keep operations moving. I felt the shift immediately. Not an accusation, a delegation. Responsibility moved without changing hands. I looked at the logs again. The entries were real. Dates correct. Timestamps clean. Too clean. The gaps were evenly spaced, like someone had decided where the story should pause. "You filtered these," I said, keeping my eyes on the page. No one argued. The technology lead exhaled through his nose, a habit he'd never managed to break under pressure. "They reflect relevant activity." "Relevant to what?" I asked, finally looking up. "To the inquiry." That was the tell. Not accuracy, relevance. My mind slid backward without warning. Not to panic, but to process. Years earlier, during a rushed federal audit no one remembered fondly, I'd added redundancy no one asked for, a parallel audit trail, mirrored and dull, buried under legacy storage rules, fully compliant, painfully boring, the kind of thing people forgot because it never made headlines. The CEO's voice tightened slightly. Is there something you'd like to add if justice was being assembled from selected facts? What if the evidence everyone feared wasn't on the laptop at all? I closed the folder and pushed it back across the table. These logs show activity. They don't show sequence. The technology-led frowned. The finance chair shifted. There's a secondary trail, I continued. Redundant, archived. It captures the same actions without editorial filtering. Silence, not confusion. Calculation. The speaker clicked. The CEO didn't respond right away. I can show you where it lives, I said, if you're actually interested in how the system behaved. The man from finance stood, already reaching for his phone. The technology-led followed him out without looking back. The line went dead. I stayed seated, pulse steady now, knowing the pressure had just moved somewhere else and it wasn't finished moving yet. They brought coffee. That was how I knew it was going to be a long night. The cups landed near the folders. Untouched, one of the agents rubbed his eyes, then pushed a fresh page across the table. Same logs, same framing, more confidence this time, like repetition might turn assumption into fact. You understand why this looks bad, he said. Leaning back, it looks incomplete, I replied, tapping the margin where the timestamps broke pattern, which is different. The woman across from him tilted her head. You're saying the logs are wrong? I'm saying they're curated. That earned a pause. Not disbelief. Interest. Pressure crept in sideways. Subtle. A mention of timelines? A reminder that open cases attract attention. That attention demands resolution. I stopped listening to the tone and started listening to the process. They weren't hunting a villain. They were hunting closure. I leaned forward. Can I ask how you verified integrity? The man hesitated. Standard review. Against which baseline? Another pause, longer this time. I reached into my bag and pulled out a folded diagram, edges worn. When we aligned to NIST and CMMC, we mirrored activity across a secondary archive. Legacy format? Low priority? Nobody checks it because it's boring. The woman's pen froze mid-note. You're saying there's another trail. I'm saying there's a complete one. The room shifted. Chairs angled closer. The coffee finally got touched. What would you hide if you knew no one ever checked the backups? I kept my voice flat. It logs sequence. Not just access. No filtering. No optimization. The man glanced at the clock. Where? On a system scheduled for decommission. Still compliant. Still live. Silence stretched. Thick now with possibility. If it matches, he said slowly, this changes scope. It changes responsibility. I corrected. They stood together this time. No choreography, no practiced unity, just urgency. As they reached the door, the woman looked back once. We'll need you close. I nodded, already feeling the pressure migrate again. The night wasn't about proving innocence anymore. It was about what the system was about to remember and who it would remember it for. The confirmation came quietly. Not an announcement, not an apology, just a change in posture. The agent who had been pacing stopped mid-step and looked at the screen again. The other leaned closer, shoulder nearly touching mine now, like the distance between us had finally collapsed. This wasn't pulled from the device. He muttered, more to himself than anyone else. I didn't smile. I didn't nod. I watched the realization take shape. They had followed the trail I pointed to. The old archive. The forgotten storage layer that still hummed along because no one bothered to shut it down. The system that never asked permission to remember. So the laptop, the woman said slowly, was synchronized. It always was. She looked up. And taking it didn't stop anything. No, I said. It just made someone feel safer. The room tightened. Phones came out. Messages were typed and erased before being sent. One of them stepped aside. Voice low, tense. choosing words carefully. She focused on the wrong asset. I felt the shift then. Not relief. Leverage. What if the thing everyone fought over was just a decoy? The man at the screen swore under his breath. There's more here than we were told. Of course there is, I said. No one builds shortcuts without hiding the long way around. The woman straightened. This system was marked inactive. Abandoned, I corrected. Not erased. Another pause. Longer. He tapped the table once. Sharp. If someone tried to clean this up, they'd leave fingerprints. I finished. A door opened down the hall. Voices bled through, clipped, urgent. Someone was moving faster now. The woman turned to me, eyes steady. If this archive exists, someone knew about it. Yes, and didn't tell us. Yes. She closed her notebook without writing anything else. Then we're done here for the moment. As they stepped out, I stayed seated, pulse finally catching up to the night. The laptop hadn't protected me. It had distracted them. And somewhere upstairs, someone was realizing that the system they thought they controlled had already spoken. The call didn't come to me. It came through the glass. Raised voices. A door closing too hard. Someone saying my name like it was already part of a sentence they regretted starting. I was still in the room when the technology lead rushed past. Phone pressed to his ear. Face tight. He didn't look at me. That told me everything. Moments later, the CEO's voice cut through the hallway, sharp and controlled in the way it only got when she thought speed could outrun consequence. I don't care how long it takes. Pull the logs. All of them. Anything older than the last compliance cycle. A pause. Short. Dangerous. No, not flagged. Everything. She hung up before anyone could argue. The agents exchanged a look. Not surprise, confirmation. She's moving. One of them said, already typing. She thinks she is. I replied. The woman stopped beside me. If she deletes, she can't? I said, not what matters. They didn't ask how I knew. They were past that. Another message came in. Quiet, efficient. The kind that doesn't announce itself. The mirrored data had finished indexing. Timestamps intact, commands preserved. The order to purge logged twice. Once where it was issued and once where it shouldn't have existed at all. How far would you go to erase a mistake that could not be undone? The man closest to the door exhaled slowly. That just turned negligence into obstruction. Phones were out now. Directions given. Floors secured. The CEO stepped into view at the end of the hall, moving fast. Expression set. She saw us and stopped short. Recalculating in real time. No one spoke. She straightened, chin lifting. Authority by muscle memory. One of the agents stepped forward, badge already visible. We need you to come with us. Her mouth opened, then closed again. The hallway felt smaller, tighter, like the building itself had decided to listen. I didn't move. I didn't need to. Power doesn't disappear all at once. It slips. And once it does, there's nothing left to hold it up. The building went quiet in a way I'd never heard before. Not empty, not calm, just paused. Like everyone was waiting for permission to breathe again and no one knew who could give it. Doors stayed open. Phones stopped ringing. A board member stood near the elevators. Hands folded. Eyes fixed on nothing in particular. When the agents moved past him, he stepped aside without being asked. This floor is restricted, one of them announced. Voice steady, loud enough to travel. No one argued. Key cards were collected. Access screens blinked and went dark. A technician froze mid-step when his terminal locked him out, hands still hovering like he might be able to convince it otherwise. The CEO was escorted out through the side corridor. No speech. No protest. She didn't look at me as she passed, which felt deliberate. Some people can't face the last person who saw the truth arrive before they did. A man from legal cleared his throat, then stopped himself. Another board member lowered into a chair. Slowly, like gravity had just remembered him. One of the agents approached me. You're cleared. The words were clean, final, no qualifiers. I nodded, not trusting my voice yet. What does it mean to survive when everything around you collapses quietly? The agent handed me a single sheet. Confirmation, process complete. I didn't read it. I folded it once and slid it into my bag. No one clapped. No one thanked me. That was fine. The absence felt appropriate. As I headed toward the stairs, the silence followed, heavier now, pressing in. Behind me, system stayed dark. Conversation stalled. And a company waited to find out who it was without the person who had been holding it together. I didn't look back. There was still one conversation left to have, and it wasn't going to be easy. She waited until the hallway emptied. I was halfway to the exit when I heard my name, quieter than before, stripped of the authority she used to wear like armor. I stopped, not because she asked, but because I wanted to hear how far she was willing to go. This doesn't have to keep moving, she said. Her hands were steady now. Too steady. We can close this. She stepped closer, careful to keep her voice low. No witnesses, no record. There's a settlement ready. Generous, immediate. A pause, then the real hook. And a silence agreement. I looked at her face and saw calculation where confidence used to live. You're offering money for time. I said, you don't have much of either. Her jaw tightened. You've already won. Why push it? The question sat between us, heavy. What price would buy your silence if you'd already won? She reached into her folder and held it out, not touching me with it, just close enough to make the offer real. You walk away clean, comfortable. No more calls, no more hearings. I didn't take it. In my systems. I said, keeping my voice flat, and there's no delete button for the truth. For the first time. She flinched. This isn't about truth. She snapped, the mask cracking. It's about survival. I met her eyes. Then you should have chosen better when it mattered. She pulled the folder back like it burned. The hallway felt smaller again. The air tighter. As if the building itself was listening. You think this ends with me, she said. I know it doesn't. I replied. I turned before she could say anything else. Behind me, I heard the folder hit the wall. The sound, sharp and final. My phone buzzed as I reached the door. A message from one of the agents. We need you again, not for what happened, for what comes next. I stepped outside without looking back. Knowing the pressure hadn't lifted, it had just changed direction. The last call came 2 days later. A familiar voice. Careful again. The company wanted to make things right. Consulting role. Advisory board seat. A clean title and quiet money. They framed it as respect. I listened without interrupting. When he finished, I told him no. There was a pause on the line. The kind that expects negotiation. I didn't give it one. I ended the call before the pitch could restart. I left Arlington that evening with a single bag and no plan to return. Not to that building. Not to that version of myself. The offers kept coming for a while. All dressed up as opportunities. All tied to the same system that had almost buried me when it was convenient. I declined each one. The quiet that followed wasn't empty. It was stable. I slept through the night for the first time in months. I stopped checking my phone every time it buzzed. I didn't feel brave or victorious. I felt clear. A week later, an agent called once more. Not with questions, with confirmation. The case had moved forward without me. It didn't need my presence anymore. That was the moment I understood what I was keeping. The lesson came without ceremony. Loyalty that only flows in one direction is not loyalty. It is leverage waiting to be used against you. If your value disappears the moment you stop being useful, then it was never recognized in the first place. Protecting yourself is not betrayal. It is responsibility. I'm still working. On my terms now. I choose what I touch and what I walk away from. I trust my instincts faster than I trust titles. If you stayed with me through this, why, thank you. I know stories like this hit close to home for a lot of people. If you've been in a room where the air changed and no one warned you, you're not alone. Share your thoughts if you want. I read them. And if you want to keep hearing stories like this, follow along. Sometimes the most important thing we take with us is knowing when to leave.